I was in a Sunday school class, and another guy had raised his hand, said that he felt like he was going to drink again. He was going to go to he went to an AA meeting. There's an old man, almost an old man. I looked at him and I thought, man, I know what that feeling is, you know. I hate for him to, to relapse. I've quit a lot of stuff in my life, you know. This is the end of my drinking career. This is, well, I didn't know it at that moment, but I felt compassion for him. You know, I was like, holy crap, that sucks. And so after Sunday school, I went up to that old man. I said, dude, if you ever go to another AA class, you know, tell me about it. I'll go with you. You know, just to basically hold his hand and be a brother to him. And so a couple weeks went by or whatever. There was no real sense of urgency on either one of our parts. He called me up and said, hey, I'm about to go. Do you still want to go with me? I was like, yeah, sure, man. I'll go. I went with him, and the time period was right there at the time of Harvey, hurricane that ravaged Houston and flooded a lot of Houston. And that was the time period, right there within weeks of that incident. And so I met the guy at the AA club. I showed up a little bit early, just because that's the way I am. I showed up a little early, and I also showed up. I had worked that day, but I intentionally did not drink before I went in there, just out of respect for him and out of respect for the AA as a whole. You know, I didn't want to be the drunk guy in the group. And so I showed up, and it was a Friday. There was a whole lot of people that were already there. And there was a whole entire motorcycle group there. There must have been about 15 or 20 motorcycles, and they were all beautiful and polished and, all that shit. So I'm standing there. I'd bought a soda and was smoking a cigarette. People were interacting with me. They're like, hey, I've never seen your face before. You okay? Everything all right? What's your name? And so on and so forth. And I'm trying to there's no corner to crawl into. I mean, it's like a big old parking lot with a bunch of bikes. I'm trying to admire the bikes. People are trying to engage me with conversation and shit. I told them I'm just there to look for a friend, and never did see my friend. And the guy's like, well, the meeting's starting. You might as well come on in. So when I got in, my friend was sitting there right up against the back wall, right up against the door, close, real close to the door. Sat down next to him, and sitting there, and they were doing the introduction to the meeting itself. And when they did the meeting, they asked if it was anybody's first time anywhere, any place. I raised my hand. I was like, yeah, I've never been to a meeting before. Well, all of a sudden, the meeting, which had roughly almost 100 people, probably somewhere in the 80s, the meeting turned towards me. All of a sudden, they called it a newcomers meeting. And all these people, not all of them, but at least 15 of them, spoke up about their experience, their strength, and their hope. And in the course of drinking, and drinking problems, and drinking sobriety. And when I walked into that door, I did not want sobriety. I wasn't there for sobriety. I was there to support a friend. When I went there, I wasn't going because I had a problem. I didn't have a problem. I just drank a lot every day. I listened to what those people said, and as soon as the meeting was over, my friend that was sitting next to me, he ran out the door and was gone. I'd hate to say I got stuck, but I got stuck because a couple of people came and started talking to me. And at that initial moment, my entire psyche and ego wanted to step outside and smoke a cigarette. These guys got me pinned where they're sitting there talking to me. And they definitely were just well-meaning people. They had my welfare in mind. They weren't being rude or belligerent. They weren't being obsessive or domineering. They weren't preaching or any of that shit. They were just asking me about me. But they had me in a position where going outside just would have been rude, socially. So sat there and talked to them for a long time. In a spirit of anonymity, I can say it was, those two guys. What was cool was dude Evans was wearing a shirt, the Doors, and I could relate to that. I was like, okay, this guy must be cool wearing that shirt. Dude, one of them, I couldn't tell you which, he said, he asked me if I was a reader. I told him, yeah, I read a lot, because I did, and I do. Bought me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, big blue book. And he said, here, just read this. I understand you're not trying to quit or anything, but if you read this, you'll at least be more educated on the topic. I said, okay, that's cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. I was able to step outside and smoke, and Evan sat there and talked to me a little bit longer. And then I got home. I gave you a time period of when Harvey ravaged Houston. Well, it was also a time period where the Houston Astros were in playoff games. They were winning. They either won or lost that night, but it was playoff for them to go to the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup or whatever it is. They ended up getting a hole-in-one that year, but I think they attributed it to them stealing street signs or something. All that aside, that was the time period. That was the epoch. And it was, I guess it was the beginning of October, because it was just shortly after. And one calendar week later, I had a 3-day concert that I was going to. I went to that concert, and it was literally held at a brewery over in Houston town. At what they call Sigma Brewery, which I've never been to before and I've never been to since. Went to a concert there, and they had multiple stages. They would play back and forth as one band finished, the other band would start setting up, and so forth. It was cool, and in the meantime, I got really wasted. There's no consequence to it. Go to the Sigma Brewery, have a 3-day vacation. Now, when I got home from that A&A meeting, I read a big fat chunk of that book that night. Probably almost 200 pages. Well past the 164, well into Bob's story. That was it, that was the next day I read a little bit, then for the duration of the year, I read that book a couple pages at a time. And a lot of the times I read that book, I was, drinking or even so far as drunk. I would be reading that book, reading those testimonies in the back of the book. I remember I went and I picked up my daughter from the daycare, and I went home, got my other daughter, and then we went to the high school to pick up my third daughter. And on my way to pick up my third daughter, I was in a school zone. I was on a street, almost to the school, and I had nodded off, like the music had lulled me to sleep, and I nodded off, and I hit a curve. And when I woke up, the two kids in the back are like, "Hey, what the fuck? What's the deal?" I said, "I'm sorry, I just slipped." And talk about a wake-up call. All I could think of is that could have been a kid, that could have been a school bus, that could have been a car, that could have been a cop, that could have been so many different things. And it was just a curve. And I went and I picked up my daughter, high school. I had the two kids in the back. I got to the school, and then from there, we were going to my sister's birthday party at a restaurant. And the only thing I could think of is I'd already been drinking enough, but I was looking forward to my next drink, basically. Now, one thing I can say is I always made it a point not to drink and drive, so I didn't have alcohol in the car with me. But what I would do is basically chug whatever I had and then get in the car. That way I wasn't driving with it. We got close to the restaurant. My sister said she canceled. So I was like, well, fuck it, and I drove home. That was that day. But it was definitely a wake-up call, and while I was reading the book, I came to that, one of the actualizations that, like, that wasn't just another day. That was like a wake-up call. But I still had all of Thanksgiving and Christmas and everything that entailed, including what would have been, I guess, the 15-year anniversary of my brother's death, and also would have been close to the 38 or whatever the fuck year it was, 34-year anniversary of my other brother's death. One of them in December and the other one in January. They're only about 15 days apart between the two anniversaries of my brother's death. Annually commiserate that moment, with pretty much getting fucked up. I guess you could say I spent the rest of the year practicing for those two events. Not to mention Thanksgiving and Christmas as well, and New Year, by the way. What was happening, though, is reading this book, and I'm starting to see myself in the pages of these books. Now, I'd written enough books where I felt like I could almost rewrite the book. I could probably at least write an essay, or maybe a page. As I read the testimonies, I thought to myself, shit, I could write one of these things because I've got a story. I've got a childhood, an adolescence, and an adulthood. But all of those stories had a recovery part to them. That was something I didn't have as far as stories were concerned. I was still very well active in my alcoholism. I read that right around the turn of the year. It's probably, maybe the second or the third or whatever, January, that I finished the book. Okay, it was just another book that I had written down in my journal as a book that I had read. I finished the book, and it was pretty much at that time that I came to the actualization that I really did actually have a problem. Like, I had lived my whole entire life up to that moment. I was 40 years old at that point. I'd gone 40 years, and I never had a problem. because I had a job that I'd had for the last 20 plus years. I had a marriage that I'd been in for 20 years. I had 3 children. I was living in my 4th house. We were in our 2 vehicles that we owned. We were just, both of us, my wife and I, were just, I didn't have a problem. I mean, that's all there is to it. I drank a lot. Now, I will say that she had a problem with my drinking. She didn't like it at all. You know, like when I went to that AA meeting, she didn't give a rat's ass. It didn't mean anything to her. It really didn't mean anything to me either. I'd gone to support a friend, and I told her so. You know, I was like going to support a friend. Now, keep in mind, that guy was from Sunday school. And apparently, he had quit drinking 20 years earlier. And it wasn't because he went to A&A. He just quit. He was going through a divorce and felt like he was going to start drinking again and wanted to go to A&A just for moral support, I guess you could say. But he didn't use AA to quit. But it was Sunday school where I met him. There's God right there. And put me into the room of the AA, which put the book in my hand, which I put the book in my brain. And as cliche as it sounds, when you have a belly full of alcohol and a head full of AA, life's not fun. You know, it's not. It took the enjoyment out of whatever was there. And so what I found myself doing was drinking out of compulsion, was drinking out of habit, drinking out of addiction, drinking for a subconscious want for the stuff, not because I was trying to get pleasure from it. And I certainly wasn't receiving any pleasure from the drinking process. I was doing it, but it was the first time in my life that I was actually, I don't know how to say it right, but I was actually like pissed off at myself. I was pissed off at myself in a way that my teachers were pissed off at me 20 years earlier, in a way that my parents were pissed off at me, in a way that my neighbors were pissed off at me, in a way that my employers were pissed off at me, my wife. All of these people had their time where they were upset with me because I had been drinking or drunk, incapable of doing something. If I wasn't incapable of doing it, I was certainly not really proper in doing it. I don't know how to say it, but what really clinched it for me was I realized that for the last almost 20 years, I had habitually been driving with my children in the car while I was drunk. You know, while I was one hand over one eye, almost vomiting, drunk, driving my children around. And so one of the last straws, so to speak, the one that broke the camel's back, was I'd gotten typically drunk, you know, and I would say just an adequate buzz, but it was probably closer to what the world would refer to as an actual drunk. I knew at that moment that I was too drunk to drive, or, you know, responsibly. And I went and I asked my neighbor, I said, hey, will you please go take me to the daycare so I can go get my daughter? And I went and got my daughter, and I signed her out, got her, took her home. I was cooking dinner, doing laundry. I'd already been to work that day. I'd mowed the lawn, took a shower. I mean, I was just doing the normal, everyday shit that I always did. And I was folding laundry when my wife got home. And now this was January, Tuesday in January. And it was the time where it gets dark early. And by the time she got home, it was already dark. I had food in the kitchen that was cooked, ready to eat. I had laundry on the bed that I was folding. I walked outside to go throw something away, and my wife pulled up. She saw me, and she had complete disgust, disdain, and just, I'm sure she just came home pissed, and I was the focal point of it. And she comes home. I'm folding the laundry, and she's looking at me, pissed. And she's like, look, I know you're never going to quit drinking. I'm not even going to ask you to stop. I'm just going to say, please pack your bag, get out of here, and leave. I don't want our children being raised in this environment anymore. You've already done enough. I hate this. I hate our relationship. I hate our, I come home from work and you're already pissed drunk. This is it. I told her, I said, well, I can quit drinking, but our lives are going to change. And she had heard that so many times, she didn't want to hear it again. She says, because I told her, I said, look, I can go to the A&A, but I'll have to go every day. It's going to be a lifelong, everyday kind of a deal. And she said, I don't give a shit. I really don't care. I said, well, I'm not going to have food on the table. It's going to throw a wrench in being able to take kids to the doctor, pick them up from school, take them to their lessons. All that shit that I've been doing that, we took for granted. All that stuff that I've been doing, I will not be able to do anymore because I will be going to AA. Because I will be doing this AA program. Because I'll be doing this shit. Our lives are going to change. Because I don't care. I'll mow the lawn. I'll do the dishes. I'll clean the laundry. I'll do the floors. All that shit. Okay, well, that night she came home was Tuesday. She was pissed, told me to leave. So the next day, I did not drink. I got home, took my daughter to a doctor's appointment, and then came home. And when my wife got home, she was still pissed. And I didn't even drink that day. And she's like, what are you doing here? I said, well, I took the kids to the doctor. I took my daughter to the doctor or whatever. She said, do you even remember last night? I said, yeah, I remember. She said, well, I told you to leave. And I felt like my cousin Benny. I was like, you were serious about that? But I told her, I was like, that's when we had the dialogue where I told her, I said, look, I can quit. And she says, I'll do everything. You quit. I'll do everything. Otherwise, get out of here. I don't want you around. Well, that Thursday, it was the January 10th, I started the AA program that day. Because I don't want another one. January 10th, I went to my first AA meeting for myself. For me. I went, and a lot of the people that were at that newcomer meeting were there, and they recognized me. They're like, hey, welcome back. Glad you're back. Well, I had read the book, which, unbeknownst to me, put me way ahead of the curve, because most people don't ever read that book. And so I'd read the book, and so I was familiar with, dare I say, how it worked. You know, I understood what the program entailed. I understood what the process and all that. Not all that, but I mean, I understood a big chunk of it. So when I walked in, I'd walk in with the white flag of surrender, and I sat in there for almost a week, kind of, I don't know the right words, but like wondering if I'm really going to make the lifelong commitment of it. And like I say, my first meeting was on a Thursday, then Friday, and the next meeting was literally like almost 12 hours later. There was a men's meeting in the morning. And so I went to that men's meeting, and I remember sitting there, my third meeting, and I was looking at those steps on the wall, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I've already done probably 5 of them. You know, I've already done about 5 of them, so I only got a few more to go. And at the end of the meeting, this guy comes up to me, a big old fucking galoot named Daryl, and he says, "Do you have a sponsor yet?" Well, no, I'm kind of still trying on these shoes, making sure they fit before I buy a pair, you know. I don't really want to sign on the dotted line until I make sure I want the product, you know. And another week or so goes by, and I know that I need a sponsor. That's how it works. So I found the guy who bought me the book. His name was Thomas, and I got in touch with him. I called him and I said, "Hey, remember me? You bought me the book. We talked." And he gracefully became my sponsor. And I talked to him, and we did the steps. And I told him, I said, I want to do this right. I want to do it in a timely manner where it's done properly, not in haste. But I also don't want to linger with it to the point where I never finish it. And so we did it exactly in the time period that God had orientated for it to happen. He was present for the whole time. I could call him right now, and he's still very much present for the moment. I am approaching my workplace, and I hope that I said something that resonates with someone. Folks, I love you.
And I love you too, Rob. I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing that portion of your life with us. I hope you have a wonderful day and know who loves you. And thank you again, Rob. And this is for you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. Have a wonderful day. God bless you, bro. Peace, bro.